Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7. I'm Gordon Ross, and in the studio this evening with me is Chris McCusker, what would you say, the only socialist in the SNP, Chris?
Oh, no, I would doubt that.
One of many.
One of many.
One of many. So Chris is here this evening to help me dissect today's news, to discuss the outcome of these various news stories and what it means for the people of Scotland. First this evening, Chris, we've got a story about the Crown Estate stripping Scottish assets to balance their books. Have you heard about this particular story, Chris?
I've roughly heard about this. This is an ongoing thing from, way back in the 70s.
Yeah, it's been going on that long?
It has been going on that long, where the landed gentry are trying to keep all their property from being swallowed up, and the bizarre thing is that the people in charge of these sort of like crown protected sites.
These are the lands that the Queen owns effectively, or did do at one time.
But they can, she can, or this body that looks after them can systematically choose to sort of like sell them in private deals in order to keep a revenue running in.
And that's what this story appears to be about, Chris. It's emerged today that the UK's Crown Estate has been accused of a cash grab that could cost Moray assets a share of £167 million.
It'd be interesting to see what Douglas Ross has to say about that. Backhander, shall we say.
So it seems that the agency has sold its multi-million-pound stake in Fort Kinnaird Retail Park in Edinburgh. However, despite the estate's assets north of the border supposed to be being devolved to the Crown Estate of Scotland, the money will instead be funneled to a retail park in Cheltenham.
Cheltenham, yeah.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's like something out of a Braveheart film. you know, where Lord Cheltenham needs his taxes to finance his army and stuff like that in case of a Scottish revolution.
Well, yeah, and according to the report I'm reading here, it says that during the Smith Commission, which was established just after the referendum 2014, the UK Crown Estate refused requests from the Scottish Government to transfer Fort Kinnaird to the devolved Crown Estate. And now it's just 2 years later, the UK Crown Estate has put its share of the site up for sale. So now we can see really why they wanted to hang on to this.
Well, again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, is the fact that they can pretty much pick and choose what they wish to keep.
So they're cherry picking.
Yeah.
So this is obviously a prime piece of real estate, which has been sold off to developers for millions of pounds, and it's basically Scottish taxpayers' money that's been lost here, really. The Scottish share of it has been lost.
But again, you can look down through recent events where Scotland's been denied money, you know what I mean, from the Westminster establishment elite. You only have to look at the money that was from the EU that was meant for Scottish farmers, and we were inexplicably told that we've taken your money and you're no getting it back.
So another similar story here. According to the report, it's come to, it's Linda Fabiani who's brought this to light again. And she has said that in the run-up to the Scotland Act in 2016, the UK point blank refused to transfer Fort Kinnaird as part of the devolved Crown Estate to Scotland. And now it's clear why. It was a duplicitous asset stripping exercise so they could flog off the site and cash in to the tune of £167 million. But according to Linda, she said, but disgracefully, Scotland will see none of that benefit. It's gone straight towards helping the Crown Estate balance its books in England and Wales and shoring up its portfolio south of the border.
Well, I don't know why they have to balance the books, because if the royal estates in England need to do restoration work on the various estates that it has, it simply just takes the money direct from the taxpayer, and I hate to say, bugger the consequences.
I read another report today which was saying that the director of the Crown Estates in England was being congratulated on an excellent year, because the sale of Fort Kinnaird apparently netted nearly 50% of the money which was raised by the Crown Estate in England this year. So they've taken, 50% of their income this year has come from Scottish Crown Estates, not English.
If you, again, going back to the Braveheart analogy, if you look back to the time of the Highland clearances and stuff like that, where the English would raise their army to come north and just basically sack whoever had the biggest estate and stuff like that, and say, we're taking over. This is England still doing the exact same thing to Scotland, but on a kind of like a digital scale, where with a click of a mouse they can just say, you're not having it.
Well, according to other details in this report today, the Scottish Crown Estate is having to force to sell tenanted farms in the north of Scotland to raise the missing revenue. They're actually having to kick people off tenanted farms in the north of Scotland in order to balance the books of the Scottish Scottish version of this.
Scottish version of that, and no disrespect to the majority of Scottish citizens, but it is more likely that these lands will be sold to wealthy English benefactors to use as their, how would we say, pied-à-terre.
Their holiday homes.
We're just going up north for a long weekend and stuff like that. Well, they can wander about in their tweed jackets and
Green Wellingtons.
Yeah.
Well, the Treasury should pay the money back, apparently, according to Linda Fabiani, who I think you know, Linda.
Yeah.
She has a territory quite near to where you live, Chris, yeah?
Yeah. Linda's the MSP for South Lanarkshire, which is just over the border from East Renfrewshire, and she does a fantastic amount of work in East Kilbride, representing her constituencies, but on a bigger scale. She's very passionate about the land that should be kept within Scottish hands.
Yeah, used for the benefit of the people who live on it. Linda's saying actually that the Treasury should be forced to pay the money back because it was wrongfully gained, and they have the opportunity to put things right, but I can't imagine that they're going to do that.
It's a gallant statement, but how many times have we asked for money back from the Westminster government? You only have to look at the fact that the police and the fire service are still taxed, and yet everywhere else in the country they're not.
And they still never managed to get that back tax back from the customs, revenue customs.
But I mean, again, that's the epitome of the Westminster elite, who have got nothing but complete disdain for anything that Scotland desires or wishes.
They don't care, do they?
No, they really don't.
I've noticed also that MSP Richard Lochhead has also waded in here and said that the sale is a scandal, while the I'll just get this name right, Auchenhalrig farm on the Fochabers estate, which is owned by the Crown Estate in Scotland, was being considered for sale to generate much needed revenue. And he says this windfall would have made a huge difference on sites across Scotland. And he lists 3 of them here, Fochabers, Glenlivet Estates and the Port Gordon Harbour as well. All of these things now lacking money through the misappropriation of this money by the English Crown Estate, for want of a better word here.
Yeah. I don't want to run the risk of going down the avenue of denigrating the royalty of the UK. It would come of no surprise as the fact that, you know, as a self-confessed Republican, I think Scotland
you
would
have
be
no great
better off.
sympathy for them.
Absolutely none whatsoever. I think Scotland would be better off without any sort of like direct involvement from the royal family. But it's worth noting to say that these things they don't seem to come direct from the royal family. They seem to come from, you know, decision makers in suits. You know, who are sort of like obviously micromanaging the portfolio of the royal family. There was one thing earlier on in the week, the Wild interview on Channel 5. You know, what has Scotland got? Oil, whiskey, a loch, and a big monster.
Yeah.
And
this was Princess Diana, her ex-butler.
Aye.
His only claim to fame is that he's taking advantage of a dead princess, basically.
Yes. He was basically alluding to the fact that the Queen, given that we will, you know, one day be independent, the Queen would be going overseas for her holidays if she was coming up to Balmoral. And I thought that was just that. Do you know what I mean? What a cheap comment.
Well, unless we dug a canal between the North Sea and the Irish Sea across the border, you can't really go overseas.
You know, someone else in the English media dug a hole for themselves by saying that you know we would rebuild Hadrian's Wall. But someone actually pointed out to them that actually Hadrian's Wall is in England. You know, I mean, they made no desire to reappropriate land.
A lot of very uninformed comment, I think it's safe to say, about Scotland on some television shows. One other thing that sprang to mind, it's not on the script, but I have some direct experience with the Crown Estates, and that is that they also own the seabed from the shoreline to, if I remember correctly, the low water mark, the low tide mark. They actually own the beaches as well. So if you want to build a pier or a jetty or anything like that, you also have to ask permission, and you have to usually rent it from them. Believe it or not, rent the land right outside your front door sometimes.
As I say, we could further discuss the royal family, and I think you know, there would be a black pariah outside waiting for me once the programme finished, because you know I've got no regard for them, just no love for the royal family. You don't
feel they have any connection with people's lives here at all.
Well, the only connection that they have is bagpipes, stags, and tartan shortbread tins.
Yeah, it's all very much tourist.
You know, it's an archaic establishment from a bygone era that should, you know, I mean, be kept for all intents and purposes, for you know, with regards to tourism and all the rest of it. But you know, to be you know, in a modern society, to be lorded over by anyone, whether it's you know an unelected royal family who inherited all this wealth and land that was handed down from father to son and all the rest of it, is just something for the birds for me. It just really doesn't float my boat.
As far as I know, the Crown Estates Department is in fact a part of the civil service, and it's actually, although it says the Crown Estates and it's got this royal badge upon it, it's actually just another department of government that basically makes money for government by renting or selling land in Scotland from underneath us.
Well, I mean, that surely doesn't surprise me. If you remember, what was it, back in 2008 or 2010 or something like that, the area of the east coast of Scotland was extended into
annexed, I think
England.
is the word we were looking for there. Yes, the border, the maritime border was moved. Yes, that's right.
And so obviously they would have had to have discussions, from what you're telling me, that if the Royal Estates had control of the beaches and the low level sort of like seabed, they would have to have discussions with them, and in which case, you know, that's sort of like Westminster and the establishment elite working hand in hand,
Oh, yeah.
you know, once again against Scotland and
But
stuff like that. And we're
6,000 square miles of the North Sea from Scotland's territorial waters without
Yeah.
telling anybody
Uh-huh,
was
yeah,
a bit, a bit
cloak and
sneaky.
dagger. Cloak and dagger.
Well, let's move on to the second story tonight, Chris, and this is a story about how low-income households in Scotland are now saving on their fuel bills. And this is as a result of improved energy-efficient measures in their homes. Now, according to the report I have here, the last year that we have records for, 15,000 Scottish households saved more than £4.6 million in fuel bills as a result of energy efficiency measures installed through the Scottish Government schemes. This is such as insulation, double glazing and heating controls. So it seems that the measures that the Scottish Government has put in place are beginning to now actually have some effect on people's domestic fuel bills.
Heaven help us the fact that we're actually going to discuss an SNP good story.
Indeed.
But you know, I mean, the Labour Party and the Tory Party have got no credibility when it comes to discussing energy or, for that fact, housing.
You never hear them talking about
well,
it.
Well, no, you don't, because you know, I mean, Labour's record, obviously, with house building is, what was it?
Non-existent?
No, wait a minute. I do believe that they built half a dozen houses in a northern island, Shetlands or the Hebrides or something like that. Yep, they managed a grand total
How many
of
years did it take them to do it?
I think it took them about 2 years to do it, but they were in office for that level of time. Yeah, it was a bit like Petrocelli in the 70s, do you know what I mean?
Well, coming back to the SNP good part of this story, it says here in 2014 the Scottish Government set the first energy efficiency standard for social housing to be achieved by 2020, and 80% of social rented homes are already compliant. So before we reach 2020, we're almost there.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So it shows that not only are they setting targets, they're actually reaching them as well,
yeah.
Something which we don't often hear about
south
of the border.
And actually, I had a laugh yesterday when I was watching PMQs that Jeremy Corbyn was saying that you know, the UK government were leading the way in climate change, and they were the first ones to come out.
Causing it?
Yes, he admitted that part, but he said that the UK government was the first government to come out as a climate emergency. And he was quickly corrected, I think, by Patrick Grady. The fact that you know, we not only declared it, but we immediately acted upon it as well, and came out with various points of legislation. But again, it goes to show you that, and harking back again to that Channel 5 interview, Scotland is not just about oil, whiskey and a Loch Ness Monster. You know, Scotland is leading the way in renewable energy and affordable housing as well, because it's all very well delivering affordable housing, but the housing has to be of such a standard for the modern age where...
I mean, I can tell you that my own home has benefited from grant aid from the Scottish Government to put in a very efficient new gas central heating system, and it is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, my house is so warm now I have to turn the heating off after 5 minutes. Because the system is 95% efficient, and that's just astonishing. Well, again, almost none of the heat from the boiler escapes to the outside world at all.
Well, I don't know about your the own fabrication of your house.
This is quite an old house.
It is quite an old house. Well, I'm in a relatively new build, relatively, as I say, 4 years, and it's one of those kind of like smart homes. And I kid you not, I've not had the central heating on since about April. And the front room is south facing, and just for information, folks, the sun shines on my Saltire flag thing on the wall, but it absorbs an awful lot of heat, and it also retains it as
keeps
well.
It in,
yeah,
more
yeah,
importantly.
and the longer that we go through the evolution of innovation, I think houses are going to be, are going to become much more smarter, much more cleaner as well.
Well, there's been some talk about the efficacy of smart meters recently, about whether they actually help you lower your bills or not. But one thing they do is they make you aware of just how much electricity and gas you're using, how much it's costing you, which does help. Because you know when to turn it down.
Sure.
I've also just been looking at the rest of this report here from the Housing Minister, Kevin Stewart, and he says, a warm, safe home gives people a greater sense of well-being and saves them money, and more importantly, by achieving the new standard, social landlords will reduce the poor energy efficiency to reach our fuel poverty targets and to contribute to achieving the Scottish Government's ambitious climate change emissions reductions targets. So looking at social housing as a large block, because there is a great deal of social housing, particularly in Scotland's cities. This is obviously a colossal part of the energy saving and emissions saving strategy of the Scottish Government.
I think it would have been a bigger task to take on had the Labour Party not sold off as much housing stock as it did through their should I say suspect tenure, but it's something that Kevin Stewart has actually said is highly attainable. With the and don't forget as well that the Scottish Government are constantly adding social housing products every other month.
So they're obviously,
you just need to drive around Scotland and you can just see building sites galore.
Countless new buildings going up.
And again, obviously, it was the SNP that actually introduced that a portion of all private build has to have
a social element to it.
I think it was a third or a fifth of social housing within it.
Affordable.
Yeah.
Well, the next item actually related to the last one, because the next item is actually about renewable electricity in Scotland. And again, another bit of good news, it's at record levels. It just keeps breaking all the records. Every time I make another announcement about renewable energy on this show, it's another record broken. Today, the latest figures from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy show that renewable electricity generation in Scotland reached record levels of 8.877 gigawatts. That's an awful lot of electricity, by the way, in the first quarter of 2019. That's a 17% increase over the same time last year. 17%. Enough power to power about 88% of Scottish households for a year. And that's just in that first quarter.
And that's
a staggering amount of power for one small country to make.
I had a conversation with Lewis the last time I was in the studio, and we were discussing electricity use in the transport infrastructure. And
we're talking electric vehicles.
Electric vehicles, electric buses, and also my sort of like passion of trying to bring back electric trams.
I'm with you there.
Now, we could talk about the debacle of the Edinburgh tram system. But it's now starting to bear fruit, although it was massively overspent.
It's a long-term investment, a tram system.
But it was massively overspent. However, they've now got to a point where they're considering extending it once again down to one of the suburbs in Edinburgh. But I was making the point to Lewis is that Glasgow was the gold standard for San Francisco when they were looking to put their tram system into their city. Why did our
The
city,
famous streetcars
city
of San
fathers,
Francisco.
yeah, why did our city fathers decide that you know it was
be ripped up.
an archaic
I know.
transport system that had to be you know totally removed and mothballed, where it was 100% greener.
That's right.
You know, I mean, I was
swept
recently
away
in,
by diesel buses,
Yeah,
and we know
yeah.
where that's led us.
exactly. But I mean, I was recently in Prague, and I was so impressed with the transport infrastructure in Prague. That is all just interlinked, and you never wait any more than 5 minutes for either a tram, a bus, or a metro.
If the new battery developments that were announced at Glasgow University last week before, they were announcing the world's first liquid battery.
Yeah.
So instead of having a battery in your vehicle, you have a tank
Uh-huh.
containing this liquid. It's basically like water with a lot of iron oxide in it, basically rust to you and me. And this liquid is already pre-charged with electricity, so it's like a fizzing electrical soup that's put in your car. You use the electricity out of the tank, and then they pump the tank out and put fresh liquid in. It's an incredible idea, and if that is developed fully, then petrol stations could simply convert over to liquid battery fuel. And the idea of having, as you were saying, trams coming back wouldn't necessarily need overhead power lines or even tracks, because you can have driverless trams that would follow a route.
Well, I mean, the other thing that I also pointed out to Lewis was that the natural evolution of the tram system led to the electric trolley buses.
That's right. I remember the silent death.
Yeah, exactly.
As a kid, I remember them. Yeah.
Many a time, my granny
pulled you back by the scruff of your neck.
Scruff of the neck.
Yeah,
you know.
She couldn't hear them coming.
But you know, and again, this leads into the tremendous work that Scotland is doing with renewable energy. It was only 2 weeks ago that the Whiteley wind farm in the Fenwick Moors in Eaglesham announced this investment into their infrastructure there, where they're going to have one massive big sort of like aircraft warehouse type hangar, where they're going to have these chargeable batteries,
giant Tesla cells,
which you know, can basically store the electricity that are coming in.
So when it's windy, if we're not using all the power, rather than turning the windmills off.
If we've got that bank of electricity which is constantly getting topped up every day,
it's all
then
about storage,
surely
isn't it?
it's time for Glasgow to start looking at again a transport system where you know it could harness that use
energy.
Of stored energy. Now, also that leads on to something else which is possibly not in your script, and I'm sorry to take you away from it. But recently, I was told by my comrade Graham Campbell from the SNP Socialists that Glasgow City Council have agreed in principle a consultation for to bring the buses back into council ownership. Again, now you know, you and I are of an age where we can remember the Glasgow Corpay. Now, this is something that the SNP Socialists have been campaigning for, for a number of years.
It's funny you should say this, that they were talking about bringing back the corporation buses. There is a brand new bus I saw in the streets which has been decked out in the old corporation livery.
They have brought three livery images back from the bygone age to celebrate the iconic stages of Glasgow transport. One was the green and white bus,
the green and gold,
white and gold, and the other one was the stark orange bus, the SSPTE. I don't know what the other one was.
The Glasgow City Council has actually just voted through the idea of taking buses back into corporation control again. So they are thinking now about taking back control, certainly of some of the routes which are not so profitable. And by running the buses again, or having the right to run those buses, they can. they've said that they're committed to exploring the feasibility of this.
I think that
Perhaps using the more profitable routes to support the ones which are not so profitable.
If Glasgow show the lead in this, and this is something where I'm very envious of Edinburgh, because Lothian buses, everyone can see that it works.
Yep.
If you ever go to Edinburgh for a conference or for whatever, you can't help but be impressed by the number of buses that are on the street. Now, fine, okay, with the advancement of making diesel a bit more cleaner and stuff like that.
Yep.
But surely if those buses were, like 100% greener, people wouldn't mind if there was 3 buses standing in a queue, all going to Cramond. Do you know what I mean? One after the other. And again, that's what strikes me about Prague, is that everything seemed to run exactly to timetable. And
I think also people knew where they stood with those buses because they were all centrally run by one organisation. So the timetabling was unitary.
Yeah.
The fare structure was easy to understand.
Exactly.
And you knew where everything went to, what route went where.
Yeah.
Well, let's. I'm sorry to cut you off here. We've got quite a lot to cover tonight.
Oh no, I could give it on about transport.
Well, just on the tail end of this, there's another little tail end piece to this, and that is that. Big developments are also due to take shape again with the Moray East offshore wind farm, the Kincardine floating wind project, and CEMEX Atlantis Energy's Maygen tidal array, all at various stages of planning, construction and expansion. So a lot is going on in the sector at the moment. A great deal of good news, despite, as the SNP spokesperson Paul Wheelhouse has said, despite the best efforts of the British government to cut funding towards things like onshore renewables. Scottish government and Scottish firms are moving ahead very rapidly with this now. Okay, so we'll leave the issue of renewable electricity just for the time being and move to something a little bit more potentially dangerous form of electricity generation. And this is a story concerning the Dounreay nuclear plant in the north of Scotland. And this is a place where the UK Atomic Energy Authority experimented with the world's first nuclear fast breeder reactors, something which they placed as far away from London as possible because they were worried about the fact that it could explode. They didn't obviously tell us that at the time when they built it there. However, it seems that the workers were evacuated from a high security plant at Dounreay after radioactive contamination was detected there. Now, this has emerged just recently. The incident itself occurred on June the 7th, but the site bosses have only publicly released details to a meeting of Dounreay stakeholder group on Wednesday evening this week. And according to them, the alarm was sounded as a worker sought to leave a former processing plant within Dounreay's fuel cycle area. After follow-up surveys identified further hotspots in the plant and all personnel were moved out. Now, the site manager, the site managing director, a man called Martin Moore, said that human error was to blame for the episode, which is the subject of an in-house probe. He said no harm had come from what turned out to be an insignificant, in inverted commas, level of low-level radiation. And he went on to say the contamination was very local, but it wasn't in a place it should have been normally. And it's sort of reading between the lines, it looks as if somebody maybe passed through a decontamination station without being processed properly, and there have been some contamination where it shouldn't have been. He says, we take this very seriously and teams responded well and our investigation is well underway. As if to really underline the continuing dangers of nuclear power. And Dounreay is not really even an active site anymore now. It's gradually being decommissioned, I think. You wonder at what speed it's been decommissioned at. It's a problematic white elephant that we've been left by the
boom of the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, the so-called so cheap you couldn't meter electricity.
yeah. And yet I constantly remember my parents telling me to, watch my energy usage. But the as I say, the scale of the decommissioning of this site is something that should be alarming an awful lot of people. And I realise that it can't be something that's rushed, obviously.
I think it's quite a painstaking process, taking every single little piece of it apart and disposing of them safely.
But again, the wider implications for like having this stuff in our country is more now in this time of wider questions as to why it can't just be sort of like removed. Not maybe overnight, but it's an energy that we don't need.
I think the problem is that the contamination is so dangerous that every single little part of the reactor, the core, the jacket, the cooling system, all have to be cut up into minuscule pieces and put into some kind of shielded containment before they can be removed from the site. And even then, nobody knows where this stuff is going to go.
Exactly.
And this again is another reason, I think, why the decommissioning is so slow, because nobody really wants to deal with this stuff.
But again, you've also got 7 or 8, I think it's either 6, 7 or 8, I'm not too sure of the numbers, of decaying nuclear submarines rotting away in Rosyth.
Indeed, yes.
And there doesn't seem to be any plan of action to remove them anytime soon.
The last I heard about the submarines moored at Rosyth, I think there's 7 of them there.
Is it 7?
Decommissioned, they're deactivated, but their cores, I think, have been removed, but the rest of the submarines have still got to be cut up, and the less radioactive parts have got to be somewhere buried. And that's the problem. Nobody wants the parts of the submarine buried anywhere near them.
No.
And so they continue to sit there and rust while the government seems to dither about it.
And this is again something that I wanted to mention when we were chatting about the renewable industry, is the fact that the BIFAB yard is sitting on tenterhooks waiting for the UK government to possibly hand them some work. And these people have been put on short time allocation of week-to-week contracts, and all the time we have got these massive infrastructures that we've been just discussing about with regards to renewables. But there's work there. Is
it the British government that's responsible for awarding the contracts?
Well, obviously it has to be, because it's the submarines belong to the Royal Navy.
Right, because I'm maybe getting confused, because I know that the BIFAB is also competing for wind turbine jacket work as well. Sea turbines, so we're basically building the platforms, the wind turbines. So I'm sorry, I'm getting slightly confused about what you meant there, but okay, I understand.
The capacity within the BIFAB yards, and I say yards because there is more than one yard of.
The BIFAB is a dry dock, is it not?
It is a dry dock, but I mean, we have seen that submarines can get lifted out of the water, put onto the back of a loader, and moved. If you look back to the 1950s, the Glasgow Cran was used to lift locomotives off of the back of a truck and put onto a boat. It's not out with the realms of possibility.
There certainly are floating cranes that can lift them and transport them by sea to BIFAB. I agree with you. Yeah. Well, that's about it for the story about nuclear power. There's one more item here on the agenda tonight, and this is a story regarding Serco, the public sector services company, private company I should say, which has been branded inhumane by the SNP for lock changing. And now, the SNP's MP Chris Stevens has demanded that the UK government intervene in a controversial lock-changing scheme by Serco of asylum seekers in Glasgow in a debate today in the House of Commons. Earlier in the month, Serco announced that it would restart its inhumane lock-changing programme, which could leave hundreds of asylum seekers homeless and destitute, which Glasgow City Council's leader has described as a sorry and unacceptable state of affairs. Are you familiar with this story yourself, Chris?
I'm very familiar with this because, as well as being the Vice Convener of the SNP Socialists, I also serve on the Trade Union Executive within the SNP, which Chris Stevens is our representative at Westminster. And he does fabulous work with this major issue, which predominantly affects his constituency of Govan West. And he does an awful lot of great work with Mike Daly from the Govan Law Centre as well. And 6 months ago, this was all seemed to have been pretty much done and dusted. And this seems to me that Serco are being instructed by the Home Office to continue their programme of the hostile environment.
So this is where the asylum accommodation contracts, in other words, the publicly...
which is soon to be taken over by another company.
Well, at the moment,
September.
It's the privatisation of this asylum accommodation contract by the UK government that's been a disaster, according to Chris Stevens, and it continues to fail those seeking asylum in the communities in Glasgow, and restarting this hated lock-changing programme is another spin-off, as you say, of the Tories' hostile environment policy. So they are effectively, chucking asylum seekers out of their accommodation and locking them out.
It was actually, I don't know who the quote is attributed to. But
is this asylum seekers whose asylum requests have been refused?
No,
or are they pending?
They are in process.
Right, okay. What I don't understand is why they're being evicted in the first place.
Well, because what the spokesperson for the Westminster Conservative government said, I think it was about a month ago when this sort of like started to rear its ugly head again, is the fact that we should be happy about this because it is freeing up housing stock for the Glasgow City Council. So that they can use it for their homeless programme. So
basically they want to create foreign homeless people so that the domestic homeless people
You got it in one. You got it in one.
So basically brown people out in the streets, white people into their houses, basically. So it's a kind of racist...
Mine died themselves.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely horrible.
But again, that's why I can say with 100% conviction is that it is just a stealth extension of the hostile environment that the right-wing UK government are constantly perpetuating, and it gets more scarier when you look at Boris Johnson's recent sort of like quip that he is going to implement if he gets installed, God help us, if he gets installed as Prime Minister, he is going to quickly implement an Australian points-based system with regards to immigration. Now, again, earlier on in the week, the SNP Westminster Group secured a debate in the House of Commons, opposition debate on the immigration powers being devolved to the Scottish Government.
Well, Chris Stevens actually has just been in touch from Westminster, having watched the programme tonight, and he's saying that the government's still refusing to budge on this, despite his best efforts down there to convince them to change.
I mean, honestly, Chris must feel like he's hitting his head off a brick wall, and I've got every sympathy for my comrade. As I said before, he has done fantastic work. He's been tireless on this, and he's been constantly leading from the front. And you know, very much like all our MPs down there, they really must question themselves as to why you know, if this is not further evidence of the complete disregard of the Scottish Government's wishes to be an inclusive society, I don't know what is. I really don't. And it is, honestly, it is despairing with each passing day of this despotic ruling of the just this xenophobic.
Yeah.
I have no words, Gordon. I really have no words.
I agree with you. And for what it's worth, I mean, I can see that this particular policy is designed to make the working class white poor people of this country turn against the poor asylum seekers who've come in from war-torn countries and are being told that we'll kick the brown people out so you can get a house.
Look at the unrest in the 70s, you know, with the narrative of Enoch Powell. You had these horrible television programs, Love Thy Neighbour.
Racism was right.
It was right, and it is, but we don't want to return to it as you know, Scottish Europeans. But that is the road that the English are going down, and I hate to say that because my own son is English. My eldest son is Welsh. You know, it's of no consequence that my ex-wife is English, but well. You know, the English are a lovely race.
Yes, it's the
British Westminster elite that are just absolute bampots.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the British establishment that's turning English people against immigrants, turning Scottish people against people. It's terrible.
And it also does more to enhance this dark section of Scottish community that you know, pander to the Irish, Northern Irish politics. That you know, is an absolute cancer on our society.
Chris, listen, I'm sorry we're going to have to cut you short because we've had a very full programme tonight. So I wanted to thank you for being a guest tonight
no problem.
and discussing these issues with us tonight. Incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of the show for this evening, but producing television programmes, as you know, is very expensive, and to allow us to continue making programmes for you and to pay the bills to run our studio, we really need your support, and we need more people to sign up as Broadcasting Scotland supporters. And your £5 a month would help us to continue, so please sign up on our website. Details below on your screen at the moment, www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register. I'm off on my holidays now, so I will not see you next week. I presume that my colleague Lewis will be taking over next Thursday. But otherwise, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And from tonight's crew here at Broadcasting Scotland, and also just to let you know in passing that we have a video coming up for you, which is actually looking at Chris Stevens' adjournment debate, which is about this business of the Serco lockout, is being shown in full just after we come off air in a moment. So thanks very much for your company this evening, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. From all of us here on Scotland at 7, a very good night to you.
This House do now adjourn.
The question is, this House do now adjourn. Chris Stevens.
Well, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a great pleasure to see you in the chair, and I want to rise to discuss a very important and serious matter, and that is the issue of Serco and its announcement to press ahead with asylum seeker lock change evictions. And just to give a bit of background, sir, I will be mentioning a number of organisations who have expressed their concerns both publicly and with myself: the Scottish Refugee Council, Positive Action for Housing, the Govan Law Centre, the Govan Community Project, Glasgow City Council and the Scottish Government, and of course the Tenants Union, the Living Rent campaign, whose badge I proudly wear today. Now, earlier this month, Serco announced it was going to restart its inhumane lock-changing programme, which could leave hundreds of asylum seekers homeless and destitute in the city of Glasgow. And I'm calling, as well as my colleagues in the SNP group, to prevent these evictions and future evictions from taking place. Serco, of course, currently have a contract with the Home Office about the provision of asylum accommodation in Scotland. And the recent threat to evict 300 asylum seekers onto the streets of Glasgow without any consultation only strengthens the argument that a public sector bid for those contracts would have been the best way forward, because, as my honourable friend will know, who serves on the Select Committee, the Home Office Affairs Select Committee, in January 2017 it published a highly critical asylum accommodation report which made system-wide recommendations and also uncovered unacceptable housing standards, insufficient recognition of needs such as mental health, torture, sexual violence and trafficking, as well as serious questions around the rigour, consistency and a seemingly lack of public transparency in the Home Office's performance management regime of its 3 housing contractors across the United Kingdom. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I don't want to discuss, it wouldn't be right to discuss the merits of live legal proceedings in this place, but it is a concern that I have a constituent, Mr Deputy Speaker, who has live legal proceedings in Scotland's Supreme Appellate Court, the inner house of the Court of Session, and I'm surprised that both the Home Office and Serco have decided to press ahead with these lock change evictions while this matter is still to be settled in the courts. And I do have a concern, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the labelling of asylum seekers as failed is the sort of language that we should not be using to discuss some of the most vulnerable in our society. The asylum system and process can be very long, it can be very lengthy, it can be very complicated, and I think using labels such as failed is entirely unhelpful. Now, the Scottish Refugee Council have also expressed their concerns, Mr Deputy Speaker, in light of Serco's announcement on the 12th of June, which was announced to Glasgow City Council, Scottish Government, but not members of Parliament, incidentally, from Glasgow. We did not get that until we saw the press release. The public statement caused great concern, and of course we were then written to by the Immigration Minister on the 17th of June regarding this announcement and the lock change eviction plan. Now, it's clear that it's a coordinated action between both the Home Office and Serco, and like the Scottish Refugee Council, I oppose these actions, and I want to focus on some of what Serco are up to. I would say firstly, Mr Deputy Speaker, no one should be rendered street homeless, and certainly never ever without the protection of court due process. There is a wider strategic importance in Glasgow, as Glasgow continues to resist and overcome the clear housing and due process gaps in the current asylum system. And that will have relevance to other parts of the UK, especially other asylum dispersal areas, such as the north of England, the Midlands, South Wales and Belfast. We are clear what is happening here in Glasgow with multinationals like Serco intending to evict vulnerable people and render them immediately street homeless through callous, traumatising and possibly still unlawful lock changes. These are the extreme symptoms of a failed and broken approach by the Home Office to their responsibilities in the Refugee Convention and EU asylum legal instruments to prevent destitution of those seeking refugee protection. I'll give way now.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend both for his powerful speech and for bringing this debate in the first place. He just mentioned some of the local authorities that have stepped up to the plate to take dispersal of asylum seekers into the local authority areas. Would he agree with me that other local authorities who may have been interested in becoming dispersal authorities and stepping up to that plate will be completely put off doing so by this horrendous process that they've witnessed in Glasgow?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising that point, and I'm going to express later on the real views of local government. But he is correct that there are local authorities who were considering becoming part of the asylum dispersal process, who are now minded not to, as a result of what they're seeing in Glasgow and the announcements from Serco in relation to lock change evictions. Mr Deputy Speaker, there should never be anything inevitable about destitution from any system of support, be that social housing, social security or with asylum accommodation. The decade-long devaluation, underfunding and outsourcing delivery of this public service of housing to women, men and children seeking refugee protection has been part of a wider austerity project that has penetrated deepest into communities of entrenched multiple deprivation across the United Kingdom, including in Glasgow. We should always remember that it is these areas, however, that have consistently welcomed people seeking asylum through the Home Office's Asylum Dispersal Programme. The consequence is that those communities and council areas and third sector services have, as we see in Glasgow, stepping up to help despite having unfairly the responsibilities and costs to help people in their time shunted over two of the most powerful institutions in the UK, namely the Home Office and multinational companies like Serco, who are enjoying profits of £30 million, and that basically exists only to win public service contracts, especially from the UK government departments, in, for example, immigration and asylum, but also defence, transport and other spheres. Now, the Scottish Refugee Council have had to increase its destitution service provision and are influencing their advocacy activities, accelerating their work with key partners such as Positive Action in Housing, with Shelter Scotland and Just Right Scotland, coordinating the charity legal sector collaboration against these proposed evictions. It has met regularly since August 2018 to share information and take actions via litigation, legal policy and campaigning. Other members include Legal Services Agency, the Latta Law Firm, Govan Law Centre, the British Red Cross, Asylum Support Housing Project, the Refugee Survival Trust and, of course, the Great Govan Community Project. They've had to consider the immigration's descriptions of the Scottish Refugee Council in the 17th of June letter that was issued to Glasgow constituency members of Parliament, and it is the Scottish Refugee Council's strong view that there were inaccuracies in that letter, and I want to come on to them now. Now, while the Scottish Refugee Council recognised that the Home Office, through its advice contractor Migrant Help, have made efforts by letter and telephone to contact those at greater risk of evictions by lock change notice since November 2018, these efforts, however, have stemmed largely from advocacy by Glasgow City Council and the Scottish Refugee Council to the Home Office in the Glasgow Asylum Task Force. Furthermore, the Scottish Refugee Council and other members of the task force persuaded the Home Office to initiate a support referral process. This was a pilot and comprised Migrant Help in Glasgow offering each individual at risk of an eviction of a 1.5 hour appointment. The pilot had two phases, first from November 2018 to January 2019, involving Migrant Help only. The second from February 2019 to April 2019, after Migrant Help sought assistance from the Scottish Refugee Council. The Scottish Refugee Council received 61 referrals from Migrant Help in the second phase of this process, but that compares to 419 individuals which the Scottish Refugee Council destitution advisors from April 2018 to March 2019, 263 of which were on Serco asylum accommodation. So through sustained funding from a charitable organisation and short-term resources from the Scottish Government, they've managed to stretch limited funds to prepare and lodge 120 applications for Section 4 support, with 59% of those being successful, thereby lifting or preventing 72 individuals from destitution. That's been achieved outside of any Home Office support, and I think that we would all want to continue to urge the Home Office, as a state party to the Refugee Convention and EU asylum legal instruments, to urgently provide resources that are genuinely commensurate to need, so including funding, independent advocacy support to help individuals in grave need. I'll give way in that point.
I'm grateful again to Marvel Fenn for giving way. On the point of funding, one thing that the Home Affairs Committee did recommend towards the end of last year was direct funding to organisations and to city councils in dispersal areas, because this undoubtedly has cost implications for them, being a participating dispersal authority. Does he share my frustration that the work that the Home Office undertook to carry out with local authorities to calculate the funds that would be needed really seems to have been put in the back burner and kicked into the long grass, and it has to be done as a matter of urgency?
Well, I do agree with the urgency that my honourable friend suggested, and I'm sure the Minister will come on to that, because there's a very real concern, not just from independent advocacy groups, like, for example, the Scottish Refugee Council, but again from local government and the Scottish Government, and I will come to that later on in my remarks. The priority remains, Mr Deputy Speaker, to help all those in or facing asylum destitution, especially those due to receive the 14-day notice to quit letter, followed by a 7-day lock change notice. Destitution advisors provide a holistic assessment of need and ongoing support and coordination, and that includes individuals under threat of eviction by lock changes from Serco. All these individuals are known to the Home Office. The process of submitting new evidence for a refused asylum claim is lengthy and complicated for most who might not have an option to return because of fear of persecution. To simply say that they refuse to leave is not accurate. The emphasis must be that the actions of Serco in this sphere of functions of a public nature are covered under the scope of the Human Rights Act 1998. This legal status was confirmed in a Court of Session decision. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I think it's important today that we highlight just some of the individuals who are under threat of eviction by Serco and the Home Office. We've been advised by the Home Office and the Minister at a meeting we had with the Minister earlier on this week that those with vulnerabilities will not receive such letters. But I have to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, that does not seem to be the case. And I'm going to mention just a number of cases that I have that have been presented to me by asylum charities. Now, everyone here knows, Mr Deputy Speaker, the safety and belonging that a home brings. But today in Glasgow, we are on the brink of a humanitarian crisis of hundreds of women and men who sought sanctuary in the UK. The Conservative Government has nonetheless retained its basic inhumanity in the asylum process. Since last week, it's been rolling out ruthlessly its privatised hostile environment in Scotland's largest city. Courageous women like Miriam, who has fled abuse in Eritrea, but has been refused refugee protection by the asylum system, should never have received a notice to quit. Why, Mr Deputy Speaker? Because Miriam has depression, is receiving medication and is being helped by her community psychiatric nurse. But Serco have proceeded to order her to get out her house, which means no protection against street homelessness, no rule of law or court oversight, and then to be callously ensuring trauma, to be torn away with immediate effect from her only source of shelter, to be given a lock change letter. Do we leave people like Miriam, Mr Deputy Speaker, on the streets with their mental health going through the floor, a sitting target for the trafficking or exploiters, something that the outgoing Prime Minister has said was her top priority? Can the Minister tell us, does she realise that those sorts of decisions feed exploitation and are bound to organised crime, whilst of course destroying lives? Surely the decent thing that can be done is to ensure that Miriam's lock change letters are cancelled. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I also have another concern, and that is that it's been brought to my attention of the number of cases the number of other cases which I'm going to mention are being delivered by two men in uniform, handing these letters to many individuals, some of them women who live on their own. I have a real concern that and I have to say that I find that completely and utterly unacceptable. A woman who has fled and come here to the UK, who wants to seek shelter and seek asylum in the UK, will find that two men in uniform who visit their house with letters means something completely different to them than it would perhaps to someone like us. And it really is unacceptable, and I hope the Minister will have something to say about that. But I have a number of other cases. A 34-year-old woman from Eritrea who was issued with an eviction letter dated the 12th of June 2019. Not the 20th of June, as MPs have been advised, Mr Deputy Speaker, but the 12th of June, telling her to leave her accommodation by the 25th of June. The letter wrongly stated that she had received a positive decision. It also incorrectly advised her that she must leave and should have to apply to Glasgow City Council for rehousing. That individual's hopes were raised that she had got refugee status. A week later, the same woman received another letter dated the 19th of June, again telling her to leave by the 25th of June. This time the letter wrongly stated that her asylum claim was refused and that she must leave for accommodation. In fact, this woman has an ongoing asylum claim, and she is due to attend a further submissions appointment in Liverpool on the 4th of October 2019. This woman's claims for asylum is based on her nationality and the fact that she is a Pentecostal Christian, and that she would be at risk of persecution should she return. Mr. Speaker, another case I have that's been presented to me is a 72-year-old gentleman who's an Iraqi national but has lived most of his life in Syria. He left Syria when the war started. He's lost contact with his wife and children in Europe and is in Glasgow alone. He speaks Arabic. Serco sent him a lock change eviction letter dated the 19th of June telling him to leave by the 2nd of July 2019. He has a serious heart condition for which he's had a heart operation. He also has a problem with his spine and breathing problems, which leave him bedridden most of each day. He is particularly vulnerable due to his age, his ill health, and English not being his first language. And he is traumatised by his experiences. And it's a real concern that he'll be unable to safeguard his own well-being and is at risk of neglect. And Positive Action in Housing have asked the Glasgow City Council Social Work Department to carry out a community care assessment and is seeking out possible legal support. Another case, Mr Deputy Speaker, a woman, 58 years old, received a letter from Serco dated the 21st of June telling her that her entitlement support ends on the 23rd of June, less than 2 days' notice. If she leaves her accommodation, she'll be absolutely destitute. This woman's Section 4 application is underway and her legal case is ongoing. And this woman left Gambia to ensure her daughters cannot be subject to FGM practices. Another case I have, Mr Speaker, is a constituent who received a letter on the 12th of June, who actually visited this Parliament as part of a delegation from the British Red Cross, an African lady who identifies herself as a member of the LGBT community, who feels she can't go back to her country. She was issued with a letter the 12th of June, not the 20th of June. Mr Deputy Speaker, it does appear that Serco are treating individuals with complex cases like one mass of people. And this is likely to lead to unjust decisions and vulnerable people with a genuine reason to be here being ejected from their accommodation. As a landlord, Serco is ill-equipped to pass judgment on someone's asylum status. Walking unannounced into someone's accommodation and rummaging through their private belongings does not make them an immigration officer. The people they are attempting to evict are not subject to deportation orders. The Home Office support is stopped for now, but that does not mean their cases are, to put it in inverted commas, failed. They can still engage with the legal process and apply for support to be reinstated. Appeals and judicial reviews do happen and are often successful. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to come on to the local government view. And a letter which I have with me, which I'll place in the library, from Susan Aiken, the leader of Glasgow City Council, and a note of the meeting of local authorities passing their concerns about the asylum accommodation contracts and the processes. And there are pressures in different areas, including the North East, Yorkshire and Humber, Glasgow, as incoming contractors face the need to procure a large number of properties in a very short period of time. And it's my concern that Serco are advertising the fact that the reason they need to remove asylum seekers from their accommodation so they can hand the keys back to the original landlord. That does not seem to me to be an acceptable reason. There's a very real concern from local government, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the transition deadline won't be met in some areas and contingency accommodation may have to be used. The distribution of asylum seekers across the country is very uneven and in areas of high concentrations, including in Glasgow. And local authority leaders from other parts of the UK agree that we need to progress the funding issues as local government are left to pick up the tab for the decisions being made by both Serco and the Home Office. The Home Office, in their view, is failing to address issues for which they have responsibility and seen unable to provide up-to-date data on the number and locations of asylum seekers. When data is produced, it's often incomplete and contradicts information available from other sources. And in the view of the local authorities, nothing is being done by the Home Office to convince other local authorities in the UK to participate in the dispersal programme. But as we've heard from my honourable friend, the fact that asylum seeker lock change evictions are going ahead has resulted in some local authorities suggesting that they would not want to participate in that sort of process. The Home Office response to the request for funding from local authorities participating in the dispersal programme, they are still waiting, and they see no evidence that that has been taken to Her Majesty's Treasury. So we have a number of questions, Mr Deputy Speaker, I think it would be fair to say, in relation to what is going on in relation to both the contracts and this inhumane move to subject asylum seekers to lock change evictions and to make them homeless. So I have a number of questions for the Minister, but before I do, I have to say that I am very concerned at the behaviour of Serco, and I want to reiterate it again, Mr Deputy Speaker. Two men should not be approaching women living on their own or with children and going in with threatening letters and handing them that way. That is, I think, something that I would want to hear the Minister condemn, and I would want that practice put a stop to. So can the Minister answer the following questions? I have a number of questions for her. Has she, or does she intend to come to Glasgow to witness a lock change eviction? When is she next coming to Glasgow to discuss with asylum charities and the Council the asylum accommodation contract? Does she realise that someone who comes home tonight and finds the locks have been changed, what that would mean for a particular individual? Can we have a guarantee that no one in Glasgow has or will receive a 14-day notice to quit or a 7-day lock change notice who has vulnerabilities as defined in the Home Office safeguarding policy? And I'm going to ask the Minister if she will publish the Home Office safeguarding policy, because the 4 cases that I have presented, Mr Deputy Speaker, would, to my mind, qualify under someone who has a vulnerability and would surely qualify for someone who would be defined in the safeguarding policy. Could the Minister tell us a bit more about what the Home Office define as the overstaying group, and do they have a list of those in the overstayer group? Can she also confirm that refused case management and immigration enforcement teams, are they planning to start working through the overstaying list? Are they planning to detain people at their reporting events in Glasgow? Or can she assure me that that will not happen, and indeed has not and never been discussed since the first Serco evictions announcement in July 2018, last year? And can she give us an assurance that no one in the overstaying group will be visited by immigration enforcement in their asylum accommodation purely because they are classed as an overstayer? Mr Deputy Speaker, I think the Home Office today, as a result of what has been put forward, is required to make a decision. You will have heard the rumours, as I have, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the shredding machines in government departments are in overdrive, working overtime, prior to the new Prime Minister and the new regime that's going to take place. But given the facts that have been presented today, well, you've heard the rumour now. Given the facts that have been presented today, the Home Office must now call a halt to these eviction notices. Everything we've been told, Mr Deputy Speaker, in good faith, everything we've been told by the Home Office in good faith as to how this will work in practice has been shown not to be the case. Letters were issued before the 20th of June. We were told that no letters were issued before the 20th of June. We were told that those with vulnerabilities would not receive letters, and we've shown that not to be the case. And the style of how those letters have been delivered, I think, is completely unacceptable on any level, and I hope the Minister will agree with that. So I'm asking her today, as a result of what I've put forward, which are the facts clearly given to us by asylum charities, to ask the Minister to call a halt to these evictions. Now, Mr Speaker, I will say this in closing. Both the Home Office and Serco must know this. They have picked the wrong city. The city of Mary Barber and the rent strikes just over a century ago. The city of the great Glasgow girls who campaigned against child detention and ensured they got their school friend back. And there are thousands of volunteers, Mr Deputy Speaker, signed up by the Living Rent campaign, on standby and ready to step in and prevent these evictions. The government should be in no doubt that if it requires Glaswegians to protect the basic rights, the basic human rights of others, by using their human rights, that is what will be done. And that right that will be chosen is the right of peaceful assembly. And Mr Deputy Speaker, I will say this now, that I will join my fellow Glaswegians to prevent these evictions. Thank you.
Caroline.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for Glasgow South West for having brought this debate and providing me with the opportunity to clarify the current position in Glasgow regarding those who are no longer eligible for asylum support or accommodation. The United Kingdom has a proud history of providing an asylum system that protects and respects the fundamental rights of those individuals who are seeking refuge from persecution. This government is committed to working closely with communities and stakeholders to ensure destitute asylum seekers are provided with safe, secure and suitable accommodation, and that they are treated with dignity while their asylum claim is considered. However, it is important to recognise that the majority of the affected cohort in Glasgow do not have status in the UK. They have sought asylum, their claim has not been substantiated, they have exhausted the appeals process and now need to take steps to return to their country of origin. I will indeed give way.
Even if some, and I'm talking about some of these individuals, have not qualified and haven't met the technical definition of what a refugee is, that doesn't mean they are not vulnerable people, it doesn't mean they have significant needs, and it doesn't mean they shouldn't be treated with dignity as well. Why can't we have why do we have this cliff edge process, which means that even if an asylum claim is refused, there are no alternatives looked at, and there are no ways to try and work with that person to look at alternative ways to ensure that they are looked after properly?
Well, at no point, Mr Deputy Speaker, have I said that these people are not vulnerable. I have tried to set out that they have had an asylum claim which has not been found to be valid, and that they have been through the appeals process. And if the Honourable Gentleman will give me some time, I will move on to discuss the various means of support that are available, particularly to those who are vulnerable and those who have medical conditions, those who have children, of which we have heard some earlier. Can I just make some progress, please? The system that operates in Glasgow is the same system that operates across the United Kingdom and has been operated by successive governments since the introduction of the Immigration and Asylum Act of 1999. Asylum seekers and their dependents, who would otherwise be destitute, are provided with accommodation and a weekly cash allowance by the Home Office while their asylum claim and any subsequent appeals are considered. This form of support is usually known as Section 95 support. If an asylum seeker is granted refugee status, they are free to take employment and become eligible to apply for mainstream benefits in the same way as British citizens and other permanent residents. If their asylum claim is refused, but they have children at the time their appeal rights are exhausted, they remain on Section 95 support until their youngest child reaches 18 years of age or they leave the UK. Those without children who exhaust the appeals process lose access to Section 95 support, but a very similar form of support, known as Section 4 support, is provided so long as they take reasonable steps to leave the UK or, importantly, show that there is a legal or practical obstacle that prevents their departure. Examples of such an obstacle include those who are too sick to travel, those who need time to obtain a necessary travel document, and those who have made fresh submissions against the refusal of their asylum claim that have not been resolved. I will indeed wait.
Well, I thank the Minister for giving way. I think that this is an important point in terms of someone's status under appeal. Now, my understanding from what the Minister has said is that someone who has been refused at an upper tribunal level is someone who could be subjected to an eviction letter. So is the Minister then saying that those individuals have effectively 14 days to submit either fresh evidence, an Article 8 report, an Article 8 application or the like, because someone who has been refused at an upper tribunal level still has rights to submit a fresh claim?
Well, the honourable gentleman is right to point out that they have the right to submit a fresh claim, but I'm very anxious to emphasise that what we cannot encourage is a circular process where people submit claim after claim when a first-tier tribunal and then an upper-tier tribunal has found their claim to be unfounded. Now, circumstances may change. I absolutely accept that. But it is important that we treat the individuals fairly, but that the system is upheld. So decisions to refuse Section 4 support do attract a right of appeal to an independent tribunal. And it is clearly reasonable to limit the offer of Section 4 support to people who satisfy these conditions. Providing support indefinitely and without conditions to people who have no right to be in the UK is wrong in principle and risks undermining public confidence in the asylum system. Whilst I have said that it is right that people who have no legal basis to remain in the United Kingdom are not supported indefinitely, it is also right that they should be aware of their options and the advice and support available to them. Advice on accessing further support or returning home with support is routinely provided to all whose claim has been refused. However, in the case of this particular cohort of people, we have gone further, and since August 2018 have been working with partners in Glasgow, including the City Council and the Scottish Refugee Council, to ensure that affected individuals are aware of the further support available to them. Migrant Help, on behalf of the Home Office, has been reaching out to those affected to explain how they can continue to be supported and accommodated if they take the necessary steps to return to their country of origin. We have also provided information on our Assisted Voluntary Return Scheme, which provides up to £2,000 in reintegration assistance. Migrant Help has contacted 373 people to discuss these options and conducted 154 advice appointments. The Home Office has also held over 296 conversations about voluntary return. The scheme available is designed to assist those who require more help and includes supporting resettlement in the country of return by providing financial or in-kind support from an overseas provider. I should note at this point that a minority of the affected individuals have received a grant of leave to remain, but have nonetheless refused to leave their accommodation at the end of their eligibility. We are working closely with Glasgow City Council on these cases and have an agreed process to move these individuals into appropriate local authority housing and to access mainstream benefits. Indeed.
Again, she's been most generous, so can the Minister just clarify then if those who are potentially subjected to a lock change evictness notice over the next few weeks are those who have right to remain?
Well, as I was saying, there are a small number of people who have been granted refugee status, but it is absolutely right that they then move on from accommodation that is designated for destitute asylum seekers so that the next cohort of asylum seekers can move into that accommodation, and those refugees, those who have the right to stay, to live, to work in this country, move into accommodation that is appropriate for their needs and is not specifically designated as part of this assisted asylum supported accommodation, which is specifically designed for a cohort of people who are still in the claims process. As the honourable gentlemen will know, I have also written to all Glasgow MPs with a direct line of contact to Home Office teams who can work on a case-by-case basis should they have any questions or concerns. All applicants involved have been notified that they can contact their MP for advice and that their MPs have a direct line to the Home Office. I know there has been some concern raised about the legal position in relation to the issuing of lock change notices, which I would now like to clarify. In July 2018, Serco commenced the process of reclaiming properties from those whose asylum applications had been decided and were no longer entitled to support. This was after a similar process had been successfully rolled out in the northwest of England. The process of issuing a lock change notice, if an individual refused to leave a property at the end of their entitlement, was paused, pending a legal challenge in the Scottish courts. That pause did not affect the eligibility of people to receive asylum support, so those who became appeal rights exhausted or were granted leave to remain continued to receive the normal letter asking them to leave their accommodation. However, in that period, Serco did not follow this up by proceeding with lock changes if the individuals declined to leave. In April of this year, Lord Tyre dismissed 2 cases brought against Serco and the Home Office contesting this course of action. An appeal has been lodged and is currently sisted. As the cases were dismissed, Serco are now moving to resolve the circumstances of those staying in Serco properties. It is right that they should do so. I finally wanted to clarify the operational process, which I have also set out in my recent letter to Glasgow MPs and MSPs. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Giving way, she says that it's right for Serco to act in that way, given Lord Tyre's judgment. Surely it would be right for Serco to wait the outcome of the further appeal. And secondly, could I also ask her to address the issue of funding for local authorities, with the Home Office having undertaken to work with local authorities to assess the impact on their resources that dispersal has? Why is that work kicked into long grass?
Yeah.
The legal action, which was started last year and the judgment concluded in April of this year, did not in fact provide a barrier to Serco continuing with this activity. They chose to pause it. The further appeal does not provide a barrier, and the judgment was very clear. And it is right that Serco should seek to make sure that accommodation designated for asylum seekers is available to those who fall into that category. I must make a little bit more progress. Each week, Serco has provided the Home Office with a list of individuals who are overstaying in properties. The Home Office carefully checks this list against internal databases to ensure that the persons have not lodged further submissions or new applications to remain, and that there are no known obstacles that prevent those individuals from leaving the United Kingdom. Once this is confirmed, the information is relayed back to Serco and a notice to quit is served, providing 14 days to leave the property. At the end of this period, and if needed, a lock change notice is served, providing 7 days in which to leave the property before the locks may be changed. The first notices were issued on the 20th of June 2019. I will indeed.
Well, I'm afraid the Minister can hold this line that the first letters were issued on the 20th of June. But I will place in the library letters that were issued before that. So can the Minister, has she clarified from Serco when they issued their first letter? Because the 20th of June date is quite simply factually inaccurate.
Well, as I set out earlier in my comments, and I can't find the particular place easily to hand, I made it very clear that Serco continued with the process because actually there was a cohort which came to everybody's attention in the summer of last year. But between that time and now, there have been additional asylum seekers in Serco accommodation who have submitted new claims, which have then been found not to be substantiated, and the process is not one that is set in aspic. It continues the whole time. So there will be different individuals who have come in, there will have been new claims made by some of this cohort, and it's important to reflect that although the Honourable Gentleman refers to other individuals who have received notices to quit, which may have been because their claim was found to be warranted, they were given refugee status and then needed to move on into mainstream accommodation, there will also have been those whose asylum claim was found not to have been substantiated and they were not in need of protection. It remains the position that all of the cohort can apply for Section 4 support at any time, and if they do, the process will be suspended until the application is considered and appeal against its refusal is decided. I think the Deputy Speaker is concerned that we're about to use more time than I am permitted. I am proud of the contribution our country makes to providing accommodation and support to those seeking asylum. But when the courts have decided a claim is not well-founded, it is important that this support is only available if the individuals take reasonable steps to leave the United Kingdom or, as I've mentioned earlier, there is an obstacle to their departure. I am, of course, always willing to consider practical ideas about how we can further encourage those whose asylum claim has been refused to accept the offer of support on these terms.
Mr.